On a February evening in 1994, on primetime British television, a man in a brown tweed jacket drove home from a furniture shop with an armchair tied to the roof of his car. He was not inside the car. He was sitting on top of it, in the armchair, steering with a rope, operating the pedals with a system of bricks and a mop. Nobody who saw it ever forgot it. The car was a little Austin Citron Green Mini with a matte black bonnet, a padlock on the driver's door, and a registration plate that read SLW287R. The man on top of it was Rowan Atkinson. The scene you just pictured, and you have absolutely pictured it, every adult in Britain has, is arguably the most famous television car stunt ever filmed. But here is what nobody ever told you. The Mini you remember from that show, the green and black one, the one you can still see in your head right now, was never one car. It was at least 6. Some of them were crushed in front of a film crew. Some of them were stripped for parts and abandoned in storage yards. One of them was sold at a Hollywood auction in 2018 for almost £67,000. And one of them, the original, is still alive today, in the hands of a private collector who keeps the address quiet. This is the real story of Britain's most famous little car, the man who chose it, the television industry that chewed it up for spare parts, and the strange, beautiful truth about the one Mini that refused to die. To understand the Mini, you have to understand the paradox of the man who chose it. Rowan Atkinson is not a casual car owner. He is, by any honest accounting, one of the most serious automotive enthusiasts in British public life. He has owned a McLaren F1, at the time, the fastest road car ever built. He has raced classic cars at Goodwood. He holds a heavy goods vehicle license. The man genuinely understands cars. So when the time came to choose Mr. Bean's transport for television in 1990, Atkinson, a man who, in his private life, could have driven almost anything on earth, picked a tiny 1977 Mini 1000 with 34 horsepower, a car that needed nearly 20 seconds to reach 60 miles an hour, a car so slow that it could barely outrun the postman on his rounds. It was a deliberate insult to his own taste. Atkinson said in interviews that he chose the Mini because it was, in his own words, inherently funny. It was small, it was awkward, it bobbed up and down on its little wheels like a startled animal. But more than that, he chose its color, Austin Citron Green, a shade of pale lime he himself would never have chosen for any car he actually owned. The matte black bonnet was added on top. It was a costume for the car, a way of saying, "This is not my taste. This is Bean's taste." A man who races McLarens, driving the slowest car he could find, on purpose, for 4 years. That paradox is the foundation of everything that follows. And the first thing you need to understand about the Mini that came out of that decision is who it hated. Every long-running British character has a nemesis. Holmes had Moriarty. The Doctor had the Daleks. Mr. Bean had a small, light blue, 3-wheeled Reliant Regal Supervan 3. And what their relationship reveals about the Mini is darker, funnier, and more psychologically pointed than the show ever explicitly admitted. The Reliant was already, by 1990, a national joke in Britain. A 3-wheeled fiberglass van with a single front wheel, famous for falling over in even the gentlest breeze. It was the only car on British roads that was visibly weaker than a Mini. And from the very first episode of the series, the very first time Mr. Bean appeared on screen, that little blue 3-wheeler became his obsession. The audience never sees the Reliant's driver. They never learn his name. They never discover what he did to deserve what came next. They only know this. Every single time Mr. Bean's Mini crosses paths with that blue 3-wheeler, the laws of physics in Mr. Bean's universe demand that the 3-wheeler lose. The Reliant gets pushed off the road, tipped into rubbish bins, knocked into car park flower beds, flipped onto its side outside cricket grounds, bullied repeatedly by a man in a Mini who has done nothing to provoke it. This is the part the show is too polite to explain. The Mini, in the universe of the series, is the weakest car on the road, slow, old, constantly broken, held together with a padlock and a removed steering wheel. The only thing on 4 wheels, well, 3 wheels, weaker than the Mini is the Reliant. And Mr. Bean spends 13 episodes systematically destroying it. This is not a running gag. This is psychological warfare. A man at the bottom of the British automotive food chain enforcing dominance over the only thing in the country weaker than he is. It is the cleanest, sharpest piece of comic writing in the entire series, and it tells you exactly what kind of car the Mini was. The Mini wasn't a hero, it was a bully with a padlock. Now, here is where the story takes a darker turn. Because while the Mini was abusing the Reliant on screen, behind the cameras, something equally ruthless was happening to the Minis themselves. The British television industry in the 1990s was not in the business of preserving cultural icons. ITV broadcast Mr. Bean. Thames Television produced it for the first 3 years. Central Independent Television took over from 1993. Behind those names was a production machine that operated on tight budgets and shorter deadlines. And when a car was needed, even a car that millions of people were beginning to love, that car was a prop. Disposable, replaceable, bought, in some cases, for a few £100s. Scrap waiting to happen. Mr. Bean's first Mini was not the green one you remember. It was orange. A 1969 BMC Mini Mark II with a yellow front wing and the registration RNT 996H. It appeared in the pilot episode broadcast on New Year's Day, 1990, watched by millions of British families settling in after Christmas. By the end of that single episode, the orange Mini had been destroyed in an off-screen crash. It was never seen again. One episode. Gone. The production team then quietly acquired its replacement, a 1977 Leyland Cars Mini 1000 Mark IV, originally painted Harvest Gold, which they repainted Austin Citron Green and fitted with the matte black bonnet. Registration SLW287R. This was the car that would, over the next 4 years, become one of the most photographed vehicles in television history. But SLW287R was a fiction. What the audience saw on screen as a single beloved car was, in reality, at least 3 separate Minis playing the same role. A second Mini, registration YAN939T, originally painted pageant blue, was repainted green and pressed into service for episodes when the main car was unavailable. A third Mini, colour russet brown, was rebuilt from spare parts on a knackered shell, specifically to be sacrificed in stunts. The seats and the carpets and the steering wheel cover were salvaged from the dead orange Mini and transplanted into the green replacements like organs from a donor body. The Mini you remember was a Frankenstein, held together with masking tape, swapped parts, and a production schedule that did not care which actual car was in front of the camera, only that something green and black with a padlock was visible in the frame. This is what television does to icons. It eats them. And then, in 1994, the production machine did something nobody in British comedy had attempted before. They built a Mini specifically to nearly kill the man driving it. The russet brown Mini, the spare parts car, was rebuilt for a single stunt. Its rear bench was cut out entirely. Its roof was internally reinforced with steel bracing so it could carry a man's full weight at speed without buckling. And then, into the dark, gutted interior, a second driver was hidden, flat against the floor, blind to the road, working from a duplicate set of controls bolted in below the dashboard. He could not see the corners. He could not see oncoming traffic. He drove entirely on instinct and on muffled, shouted directions coming from above. The man on the roof did not have control of the car. The man inside the car could not see where it was going. Together, between them, they made one functioning driver, and one of the most quietly dangerous television stunts of the decade. When the footage aired, families across Britain laughed so hard their evening stopped. Children reenacted it in their bedrooms with chairs and string. It became one of those scenes that anyone over 40 in Britain can still describe in vivid detail 30 years later. And it was a setup. Because in a later episode, the writers committed to the single most shocking moment in the entire series. They killed the car. On screen. In front of an audience that had loved it for years. The plot. Mr. Bean parks in an army base car park. He finds his usual space taken by an identical green and black Mini, registration ACW497V. So he does what Mr. Bean does. He swaps the 2 cars over, taking the reserved space for himself. What he does not know, what the audience knows, with growing horror, is that the reserved space belongs to a tank demonstration scheduled for that afternoon. The tank rolls forward, it climbs onto the Mini, it crushes it completely flat in front of a parade ground of soldiers in a single brutal shot that lasts barely longer than the punchline itself. When the camera cuts to Mr. Bean returning to the wreckage, the only piece of his car that has survived is the padlock on the driver's door. He picks it up. He looks at it. He walks away. This was a network deliberately destroying one of the most recognizable props in its own catalogue for a 30-second punchline. A green and black Mini that the production team had paid maybe a few £100s for, fed to a tank for a laugh. The car the British public had laughed with for years was, on screen, gone. And in the very next episode, Goodnight Mr. Bean, the car was simply back. Same registration, same paint, same padlock. No explanation. Bean simply got into another identical Mini and drove off, as if the tank had never happened. That moment is the whole story of the show in miniature. The Mini is a thing to be used, broken, replaced, and never explained. And yet, despite everything, the crashes, the swaps, the strip-downs, the tank, the rotting yards, two of these little cars escaped the production machine alive. The first was the Mini from the 1997 feature film Bean, a 1985 Mini Mayfair, registration C607EUW. It had originally been black before being painted green for a scene of Mr. Bean driving through Harrods department store. The scene was cut from the final theatrical release. The Mini had been built and finished and prepared for a film, only to be left on the cutting room floor. But the car itself had a strange second life. The American Planet Hollywood restaurant chain bought it and hung it from the ceiling of their Niagara Falls location, where it was admired by tourists for nearly 20 years. The restaurant closed in 2016. The Mini was taken down, and in June 2018, it was sold at an auction called Icons and Legends of Hollywood. With fees, the total came to approximately £67,000. A 1985 Mini painted green and black for a deleted scene in a Mr. Bean film. Bought for next to nothing by a production runner 3 decades earlier, now worth more than most new cars on the road today. And then there is the one that lived. When the original live-action series ended in 1995, the most famous Mini of them all, the real SLW287R, the 1977 Leyland Cars Mini 1000 that had appeared in episode after episode after episode, was used one final time for a comic relief sketch called Torville and Bean. And then it was left outside to rot. For 2 full years, the most recognizable car in British comedy sat outdoors, neglected, slowly deteriorating in the British weather, forgotten by the production machine that had built it, used it, and finally walked away from it. In 1997, the producers of the first Mr. Bean film realized they needed it again. The car was rescued. It was cleaned up. It was restored. Today, SLW287R is in private hands. It is the only Mini from the original television series to have been fully restored to running condition. It has never been sold at public auction. It has appeared at a small number of public events, the Goodwood Revival in 2009, where Atkinson himself reprised the rooftop armchair stunt to celebrate 50 years of the Mini, and a 25th anniversary recreation in central London in 2015 that ended with a photograph outside Buckingham Palace. This is the part of the story that matters most. The Mini you remember was never meant to survive. It was bought cheap. It was repainted because its original color was wrong. It was stripped for parts. It was swapped with body doubles. It was crushed for a punchline. It was abandoned in a yard. It was treated, from the moment it entered the television industry, as something a few £100s could replace tomorrow. And it outlived all of it. It outlived the production schedule that treated it as scrap. It outlived the network that crushed its twin under a tank for 30 seconds of laughter. It outlived the rotting yard. It outlived the Reliant it tormented. It outlived the original ITV transmission schedule and the original audience that watched it on Saturday nights with their families. A car bought for the price of a second-hand fridge, painted a color its own driver despised, is now a private artefact, untouchable, unsellable, kept by a single quiet owner who understands what every British viewer over 40 already knows. that this little car is one of the most valuable and important vehicles in modern British cultural history. The disposable prop became the priceless icon. The thing that was supposed to be broken became the thing that refused to break. That is the real story of Mr. Bean's Mini. If this brought back memories of watching Mr. Bean on a Saturday evening with your family, drop a comment below and tell us which scene you remember most. The armchair, the padlock, the tank, the poor Reliant. We read every single one. And if you want more stories about the cars behind Britain's most legendary television moments, make sure you're subscribed. Until next time, never underestimate the slowest car on the road.